You voted on it, and now I'm going to discuss it. We're going to get all into the yo, 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 homie, yo trope and what all that means and why exactly that trope is racist. I'm your host, Cool Colas, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. So let's go ahead and get into it. The yo, 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 homie, yo trope is a trope that doesn't just exist in media. It also exists in real life as well, too. This is when you see a white person who is typically a male. Every now and again, you'll see a woman doing this as well, too. And we'll get into that later. Who will embody this gimmick of trying to emulate an exaggerated caricature of a black person who typically is in hip hop, thug, or gangster culture. And they try to personify it in a way where it's something that makes them popular, or they're known for basically having this cheap mimicry. The reason why I say it's cheap mimicry is because it's all an act, y'all. Because I'm going to tell you one thing that a lot of these yo-yo-yos are not going to tell you. These types of individuals will cosplay the culture basically until the police show up. Because as soon as they see that, they're either getting in trouble for something that they're doing, or, they get into some type of scuffle or squabble with a black person, or whatever the case is, they turn lily white like hell. They start talking real proper. They start talking, they had never done this trope whatsoever. And all of a sudden they fully embrace their Anglo origins. When it comes to the behavior of this yo, 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 homie, yo, the typical idea is that most people will see this as a silly character, somebody who is not to be taken seriously, somebody who is just doing some quick mimicry, maybe for some laughs, right? So it's typically seen as something that's silly. Now look at like Malibu's Most Wanted. This is a good example of where it comes off and it looks really silly. You have this white boy who's trying to desperately emulate some form of gangster culture, which is, them trying to really emulate black culture, at least that side of black culture. So it's more of a joke in that context. Or another good example of this would be John Cena when he had the Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick when he first was in WWE. So back in like 2004 when he was trying to emulate a white rapper. This was the gimmick basically that started him off in his career, and it kind of taken off to what you see today. And we'll get into that again later in this video. However, in some instances, it's actually quite serious. And a good example of this would be the character B Rabbit in the 8 Mile movie. And I really want to break this down, y'all, because what I've been getting a lot is people who've been trying to push back on the concept of this being something that's acceptable, justifiable, but it's not. And we really need to talk about that. But anyway, B Rabbit from 8 Mile is a great example of a yo, 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 homie, yo, who falls totally into the category, checks off all the boxes, but instead of being very silly, he's actually a very serious character, and he's a character that's meant to be taken very seriously. What they were going for with this B Rabbit character was having a narrative of a white man who respects the culture and he struggles alongside black folks, and he uses his talents, that being rapping, to prove himself. And he's framed as someone who deserves entry into hip hop, who overcomes the odds in black spaces where he's not accepted, and he gains credibility and even dominance in a certain way through his sheer rap skills. And that's kind of what they were trying to present through this movie, but the thing is, beneath the narrative is a deeply racialized ideal. It's the ideal that black culture is open source. It's something that can be shared with pretty much anyone. It's not something that was originated from us, by us, for us. It's something where we're supposed to share that thing with other groups of people who come into it. There's a very, again, racial aspect of this, whereas other cultures are allowed to have the things that make their culture that culture. We have to share everything that we have and allow people in, especially people who have historically hated us. So that's why I said this is a very racist, racialized ideal. And even when you look at 8 Mile, it tries to show B Rabbit as authentic. And the large effect here is that you have this white boy who becomes a hero in a black space because, again, he's an honest person just being talented and being hated on because he's talented. The thing is that because of this movie, Black Pain, and what, why we actually started doing hip hop in the first place, using, music as a form of resistance, that's used as kind of like an underthought. The Black Pain of it is a backdrop. Black people are the side characters in this movie. And, the struggle of B Rabbit as a white boy in hip hop is what is being put at the center. And not only did the B Rabbit character benefit at the very end of this movie because of what he showed off, Eminem himself in real life also benefited from this type of deal. He ended up being the white boy with bars, which is this myth that they always try to pull around, where a white person is going to be totally just thrown even further into success in hip hop society because of the fact that he's white alone. And that's not to say that Eminem doesn't have any talent. It's just to simply say that he's even bigger than what anybody would have expected because of the fact that he is white, because it's seen as an anomaly. And there's other factors that go into that as well too. It's not just that, and one of the things that I kind of noticed too is that this is a way for this movie solidified this idea of it being acceptable for Black people to see certain white people as real ones, and it started that whole invited to the cookout thing, which we'll also get into. But this still was protected by whiteness in ways that no Black rapper would have ever been protected. I mean, think about it. We can't just be Black and then just start rapping and then things are good. We have to actually prove ourselves. The fact that he was white alone, he could be average or mediocre, and he could kind of just emulate, what some rappers did when they first started off in hip hop, and everybody just loves them. And that's what this movie tried to solidify. It's a thing. Could a poor Black kid with violent lyrics, drug issues, and baby mama drama be marketed the way that Eminem was? And on top of that, mama issues as well too. I mean, think about it. Like, could this be something that we could do on a global, commercial, and a corporate scale? I mean, the reality is that we couldn't, we would be demonized for this type of thing. And like, even if there was some level of success, we wouldn't be seen as some type of hero, and we wouldn't be overly protected. Something that people need to understand about this 8 Mile movie, by the way, is that this movie really was about being anti-gatekeeping. In other words, it was trying to portray that Black people were wrong for wanting to gatekeep the culture. And it totally exaggerated that ideal by saying that we were villains. It painted us as the antagonists, and it painted white people who were just trying to be honest creators in hip hop as protagonists who were just being demonized for no good reason. As a matter of fact, they were trying to pull some type of reverse racism type of deal, I want to do a slight analysis of the B Rabbit character, and I want to talk about how he embodies this trope even beyond what I had just stated. The thing about the B Rabbit character is that he did a lot of things throughout this movie that show that he's embodying exactly what I'm talking about. And I want to bring up a few instances and things that I caught, especially during that last freestyle or that rap battle that he had against the Free World. So one of the things that I noticed is that in the battle that he had with Papa Doc or Clarence, whatever you want to call that Negro at this point, he said a few things that we typically say in Black culture. So it's as if B Rabbit himself has just actualized himself as a Black person already within the culture, meaning he can use our lingo, he can use our slang, he can use our vernacular, and he can actually say the things that we typically say to each other. So I want to just go over a few things. One thing that he said in his battle was, everybody from the 313, put your motherfucking hands up and follow me. He did all that stuff, right? And so he was using that as a way to go into the idea that Papa Doc himself wasn't from the 313 and that he wasn't a gangster. His real name was Clarence. He went to Cranbrook and all this other stuff. So he brought up all that stuff to basically say that, he really wasn't from Detroit, although he was pump faking like he was, let alone be a gangster. And that's something that we used to do back, growing up in the Detroit area, because I'm actually from the Detroit area myself. And the reason why I always say Detroit area, not Detroit, is because I was born in Detroit, but I was mostly raised in Oak Park. So I even know not to go and say, hey, I am from Detroit because I wasn't raised there despite being born there. With that being said, Eminem is doing that same thing because this is something that black people would do to each other. It was this thing of, oh, if you live in Southfield, you're not from Detroit. If you live in Royal Oak, you're not from Detroit. If you live in Roseville, you're not from Detroit. If you live in St. Clair Shores, you're not from Detroit. And, you know, to a certain extent, I think one could say that that's understandable. Eminem is doing the same thing, again, as if he is within our culture and he's one of us. The thing that I found very interesting is that he said that his friend Future was an Uncle Tom. And so I found that very interesting because, not because it was false or anything, he actually was right. But the problem was that he was using that terminology. It's as if he, again, actualized himself as a black person talking about other black people. And again, I want to kind of re-angle what I just said. He was right, but he was like partially right. And the orientation of it was just totally off. So the reason why I say that he was partially right is because what he was trying to basically say was that this was a dude who was basically samboing and kissing up to white folks, which he was, because he was acting like B-Rabbit was his very best friend. You know, I was like, you turn the tables on these motherfuckers. He was saying all that shit. But my point is that with this character, with the Future character, you know, if he's calling him an Uncle Tom, that's a term that a lot of black people would use to describe another black person who was samboing. Again, actualizing himself as a black person using black terminology by saying the whole Uncle Tom thing. But even beyond that as well, too, let's just take the Uncle Tom topic. Let's not start criticizing why it's used, because sambo is really the word that should be used, not Uncle Tom. But let's just talk about Uncle Toms for a second. The idea here is that B-Rabbit, this cultural appropriator who's trying to get in hip hop, and Future, who is a Uncle Tom, who is a white ass kisser, are positioned as the protagonists, the good guys in this story. In the free world, real rappers in Detroit or the Detroit area who are black are positioned as antagonists. And also, to a certain extent, not as good as Rabbit, or not authentic enough to even call themselves a part of the culture. It's as if B-Rabbit himself, it says, I have now solidified myself so much as being a part of this culture that I can decide what black people are not a part of it. I'm trying to get you all to understand the racism from that. If I'm being real with y'all, he didn't really win those battles based off of just rap merit alone. There were other factors that were helping him and that aided him in being able to win this rap battle that he had against the free world. And I want to kind of give a few examples of what I mean by that. Look at the battle that he had with Lickety Split. During that battle, Lickety Split used like 100 different references to basically make fun of dude because he was a white boy. And really, that's what rap battling is about. It's about roasting, but in a poetic way. If that's something that he has against you, then he's just using it against you, and it is what it is. But if you look at B-Rabbit's rap back to him, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't overtly strong. As a matter of fact, it probably was on par or worse than Lickety's up until he started doing the "you can't get me be wickedly and splickety," you know, he was doing all that shit. You know, at the point where he started doing that, and at the part where, you know, he had showed his ass, that's when I think he ended up winning. So it was more, in my opinion, more of an audacity and a shock thing than it was the fact that he was so lyrically strong when I think about what he had been saying. So some parts of it were pretty good, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is that it wasn't as strong as people were making it seem. And it was a lot more indecisive than how it was made to be seen there. And I think one of the other reasons, again, why he was winning these battles was because he is white. And they were like, look at this white boy go. It was just shocking to people. So he was winning off of that. In my opinion, he lost the Lotto battle. I don't care what nobody says. I think he lost that. I mean, Lotto's first verse, and rest in peace to the guy who played Lotto, by the way. Lotto's first verse was strong. He was like, I spit a racial slur, honky sue me. This is a horror flick, except the black guy doesn't die in this movie. I mean, that was already strong as shit. I don't care what nobody says. And the Leave It a Beaver line was so good, dude started smirking in the damn thing. So you already know that this dude was already lyrically great. So to me, I noticed that Rabbit, when he was rapping, although his raps were decent, he was leaning on other things. And one of the things he kept doing was he wouldn't just talk about his opponent alone. He would talk about his opponent and free world instead of just trying to roast his opponent by himself. Whereas they all just talked about Rabbit whereas Lotto just talked about Rabbit. And then that was pretty much the end of it. And I had some people on Instagram who were kind of listening to me talk about this topic because I've made a video about this in the past, and I also did some reels to talk about this concept as well too, to prepare people for the video I'm doing right now. And some people are like, well, man, it's about his real life. It's about his real life. People were like whining about that, but let's kind of get into that as well too. When it comes to the 8 Mile story, okay, there were some things that were true. There were some things that were not. It was loosely based on his life, but not totally. And we need to get into the difference between the things that were actually about his life and that were not about his life, so that we can just kind of squash this argument. Because to me, this whole 8 Mile was Eminem's life argument is nothing more than a way for people to justify why putting this movie out was actually acceptable. But really, it's no different than BMF when they talked about how what did they say in the little caption? Although some of these things were made fictitious for the sakes of the TV show, some of this shit actually happened. But they said something like that. It's no different than that. So the first thing that's real is that he grew up in the Detroit area. Notice I said area. Warren specifically. If we're going to hold black people to the standard of you got to actually be from the city to say you're from the city, we need to do the same with white boys and stop acting like he's actually from Detroit. Because I couldn't go around again and say, hey, I'm from Detroit because I grew up mostly in Oak Park. But regardless, he grew up in Warren. He grew up in the trailer parks and he grew up in poverty. This is something that is very true. And he also grew up in predominantly black neighborhoods and was one of the few white kids in some of the schools that he went to. He was bullied, right? And he was someone who actually went through a lot of trials and tribulations, trying to make sure that he was getting into the hip hop scene and being able to be respected and recognized. So this is something that actually was true. What's also true is that he was having a lot of issues with his mother. And this movie mirrored a lot of what he actually talked about and the things that kind of went down in real life and him trying to showcase that. So again, this part is something that was portrayed in the movie and also happened in real life. The first thing that is not real is the narrative that was actually created around this movie. Again, this was told from the perspective of a white person who's trying to get within hip hop, who was creating this myth that their whiteness itself is a barrier in them getting into hip hop. And that's why with Eminem, he went a lot into that whole bullying angle, but we need to discuss that. The thing is that black people, like in foundational black American culture, got bullied no matter what. It had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with culture or none of that. Now, those things may be used against you, but at the same time, you got bullied because that was just the thing that we did with whoever. But the reality is that if you look at Eminem's journey into getting to where he got to, it actually aided him in being able to be successful. One of the most successful rappers at that. And we'll get into that in a minute. But my point is that they're trying to act like through this movie that whiteness was a barrier that did not allow people who were white to be successful in hip hop, when in actuality, all they were doing was going through the ropes of what it was like being in hip hop, just generally speaking. You had to earn your credit. You had to earn your right to say that you were somebody who should be respected within this whole genre of hip hop, right? So the reality is that I'm not here to say that he didn't get bullied or whatever, but to say that this is a racialized ideal, something that is an oppressive system that white people would experience being within this, is just total bullshit. The reality is that these are individuals whose whiteness actually helped propel them to higher ranks within hip hop. As a matter of fact, I would even go to say is that some of the people who even criticized Eminem being there in the first place were simply trying to keep this a black space because they also were aware of, when other people would come into the space and they would try to colonize it, as many white people have actually done, both in the past from that time period and also in the present. And a lot of other rappers have called this out too. Like Lord Jamar's called this out. You know, he's, you know, part of Brand Nubian and whatnot. Also, too, the racial elements were also oversimplified and exaggerated. There weren't these gangs of black people called the Free World or somebody similar even who were just beating down on him. You know, and it wasn't even explicitly said that black people, there's no evidence at all that black people exclusively, black men, were going around just beating down on Eminem all the time. This just was not a thing. So they were doing this again to dramatize the movie. But while dramatizing it, they also were trying to retell the story. That's why I said when it comes to hip hop, this was a black creation. It was a black creation that was created out of resistance. The other thing that too was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger and frustration that black people had with their circumstances, especially post Jim Crow and all these other things. So, you know, they used the mic to basically explain their circumstances and the proximity crimes that have been created against them. That was the whole point of why it was something that was so sacred. It was basically a way for black people to vent and to get these things out of their system. So a white person comes around and says that I want to do some form of cheap mimicry of it. I mean, why would anybody not be frustrated that they would come in and, you know, try to emulate something that they had never experienced? I think I forgot to mention too about B Rabbit and the freestyle scene where he was going against Papa Doc. One of the things that he also said was, don't ever try to judge me, dude. You don't know what the fuck I've been through. So he thought that shit was deep, and there were probably a lot of us who were eating butter biscuits who thought this shit was deep as well too. But the reality was he was trying to compare being a white boy in a trailer park, being a poor white boy in the trailer park, to a black man being in the suburbs or a black kid being in the suburbs, which the reality is that no matter what your economic stance is in society, racial issues are always going to play a role while you're in a system of white supremacy. So it doesn't matter if there is a black boy who grows up in the suburbs and a white boy who grows up in the trailer parks. They still will be able to reap the benefits of white privilege. You know, we can't go and, you know, go up to the police and get smart with them or even reach for our wallets, let alone without them trying to pull out a gun and then shoot us, you know, if we get pulled over. And then with these, you know, white folks, I mean, I've seen stories where white people had damn swords and shit trying to cut the damn police up, and they still were trying to find ways to just, you know, peacefully apprehend him. I mean, Dylan Roof, for example, he went into a church in Columbia, South Carolina, and then just sprayed and killed, 9 or 10 people, and they took his ass to Burger King. So that's your white privilege right there. And then on top of that, too, I mean, even if we're just thinking about comeuppance, I mean, a black person who is college educated and a white person who either has never been to college and even some cases has been to jail or prison could apply for the same job. And oftentimes that white person will get a job over that college educated black man. So don't sit here and tell me about you don't know what the fuck I've been through like that shit is actually deep. The thing about Eminem is he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that hip hop was black music and he knew he was profiting from it. And you can even hear him admitting to this in some of his lyrics, because I want to actually just show y'all something in case you either forgot or just didn't know that he said this. But in the song Without Me, he literally tells on himself. And this is what he says, and I quote, "Though I'm not the first king of controversy, I'm the worst thing since Elvis Presley. To do black music so selfishly and use it to get myself wealthy. Hey, there's a concept that works. 20 million other rappers emerge, but no matter how many fish in the sea, it'd be so empty without me." So that tells you exactly why I say that he knew exactly what he was doing. And although this may come off like, you know, he's at least self-aware, this literally is a brag. If anything, this is a loud brag that he did in a covert way. And because he did in his lyrics where he's already, you know, making random noises and doing all the other stuff, you're not even paying attention to what he's saying because he sounds so funny and interesting and entertaining and all this other stuff. So nobody's really listening to what the fuck this white boy is actually saying. But he literally just told you that he was cool with, or he's aware aware that he is being a cultural appropriator who earned money from his cultural appropriation, and he's letting you know that he did it even better than pretty much any other person who was in the past or who was going to be in the future. That's basically what he was saying here. Eminem has even taken stabs and shots at Michael Jackson. You know, he's mocked him, he's made skits about him, he's talked about him in the Just Lose It video as well too. And then Michael had to basically pull a little bit of a rabbit out of his hat on that ass because he bought the rights that were tied to Eminem's catalog through the Sony ATV division and publicly called out that disrespect. And it exposed how this yo, homie, yo likes to get inside and then viciously attack black people who are within the culture because they're trying to get a quick joke up off of them because they have a low-key vitriol for them. Because Eminem doing that was straight up venomous. And he basically got his ass checked for that shit. And let's not just try to hang our hats on the whole Michael Jackson thing or the thing I said about Without Me. He's also made other disparaging comments. Like, for example, he literally had anti-black slurs against other artists. Like, he's talked about black women like Mariah Carey as well, too. And that shit was caught on tape as well. So not only has Eminem been an appropriator, but he's actually shown you instances where he actually had a lot of venom for black people within the culture. And then again, he turned straight up into a white boy again. I mean, that whole hip hop shit just basically went the hell away. One thing Eminem was right about, he is not the only one to do this. There are many examples of this yo, homie, yo that you'll see. Other good examples of this are Chet Hanks, J.W. Lucas, Michael Rappaport, Gary Owens, and Post Malone. These are all individuals who have also done this to some extent. And here's the other thing too. It's not even just white men. White women will do this as well too. That's why you'll get the Bad Babies and the Whoa Vickies and the Iggy Azaleas and Miley Cyrus and people like that. And the funny thing about the white women, the really funny thing about them is they do it to a point where they get rich and they like to go back to being lily white women, especially Miley Cyrus. That's the thing that always fucks me up about them. This is how you know it's a gimmick, because they're only doing it because it's a way for them to make a buck off of our image, and then they can go back and then just be lily white again. That's why you don't see, Miley Cyrus going around twerking her little chicken cutlet ass cheeks. You don't see that shit going on. You don't see Bad Baby like doing the same shit either. She's not going on Catch Me Outside. How about that? She ain't doing all that stuff. She's now trying to talk about beauty and glamour, and she's trying to almost tap into her femininity a little more. I'm kind of like seeing. And then, you have all these people who, again, although they talked about hip hop culture and emulating it, they seem to have a lot of venom for the people inside of it. And they make moves against the people who are inside of the culture. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves at this point is, why does this happen? Or at least, why would black people allow this to happen? And the answer is actually very simple. The reason why black people allow this to happen or have let this happen is because they have Stockholm syndrome. There's this idea of loving your oppressor despite the fact that they shitted on you horribly. Despite the fact that they killed you, they raped you, they did all these horrible things to you, you still want to love on them and you crave their acceptance. The reason why this whole white person invited to the cookout shit even exists is because black people still, some black people that is, crave white acceptance. They want, white people to still love them, or there to be an inkling that they still like them and could maybe show them some love at some point, right? So that's why a lot of times they'll easily let white people into the culture if they just sing a part of a rap lyric and they're like, oh, and do all this other shit. Even if they do a little silly dance, all of a sudden they're allowed into the culture because look at them, they can do what we're doing. It's bullshit. And we need to stop all that Sambo shit. Also need to break down the whole cookout reference and why that. The thing is that cookouts are a big symbol and foundation of Black American culture because we are pretty much the only culture that regularly has the cookouts and things like that. Now, other cultures are going to try to embrace it and do their version of it and whatnot, but the reality is that that's something that was bred from our culture. So inviting you to the cookout means inviting you into our space, a space that we created within our culture that is a cultural practice. So with that being said, by inviting a white person into the cookout, that means that they have proven themselves worthy of being amongst us in something that we have created culturally. But the problem is that you have these buttermilk biscuit eating Sambos who will literally reel in a bunch of white people who will do cheap mimicry like the motherfuckers that I just talked about earlier in this video. Next thing I want to talk about is how this is actually racist. Because there's a lot of ways that this is actually racist. It's not just one way. The first way is that this is racist because the yo 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 homie yo is using black people as a costume. It's almost like a second blackface. It's a blackface without the blackface. It's like, how can I get in costume and act like the most degenerate, or in some cases, just a hip hop version of a black person? How can I sit there and emulate that? How can I sit there and try to create some type of fake imagery of black people who have created this culture out of pain and struggle and trying to create resistance around the things that they have actually gone through and make it somewhat poetic and artistic? And something that's so beloved is now being mocked by a bunch of people who didn't have the creativity or any of the swagger or anything like that to create what these black people have been able to create. That's basically the first reason why it's racist. The second reason, the main reason we need to talk about, is this idea of black intellectual property theft. Now, this has happened in many different categories. It's not just been in hip hop. It's also been in inventions. You know, there's many inventions that foundational black Americans or black people in general have invented that have been stolen. They've been patented and they've been basically made to seem like they are white inventions. Or sometimes you'll get black people who work in these white companies. They may be tech companies or companies where they're innovating some type of machinery or something like that, something new. And then that white company takes the credit for something that black person built who was within that company. So my point is that hip hop experiences the same thing. White people will come in, or non-black people in general will come in, and they'll appropriate the culture by trying to emulate it and mimic it and trying to make their own version of it. And will even get pissy and salty when someone either claims that they're doing what they're doing, or they'll try to do things like, you know, do venomous things towards the people who are within that culture and trying to disrespect them or disrespect black musicians, period, because they believe that they now have the street cred to go and do something like that. And they oftentimes turn it into a brand and a gimmick that they try to later rebrand into something that is not based on hip hop mimicry or black mimicry in general. Because even if you think about just John Cena, I talked about him a little bit earlier, he had that Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick, but later, if you look, he had more of a watered down version of that, right? John Cena was in, you know, he wasn't like going around saying yo, 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 and all this other stuff, but he was still doing the you can't see me. He still had on the jean shorts, and he still, you know, had, you know, somewhat of a hip hop-esque type of theme in his entrance music. So you could see that there were still elements of it there, but he was trying to change it into something else as if it had nothing to do with being stolen from some type of hip hop culture in the first place. And John Cena is now known as one of the most famous wrestlers. Yet, if you really look at his wrestling, he's not the best wrestler. He's not the coolest wrestler. And really, to be honest, if it wasn't for him just talking shit on the mic, he really wouldn't be that great. I mean, there's so many other black wrestlers that are better than him. And I mean, I don't need to go through and name them because it's very easy to name the ones that are. But my point here is that John Cena has basically taken and jocked our swagger and then turned it into a brand, then tried to turn it into something else, therefore leading to his fame and millions of dollars from his regard. And now that's why he's a Hollywood star. Going back, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how a lot of these, and this is an observation that I made, a lot of these yo, 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 homie yos not only have a lot of volatile racism towards a lot of the black people who they claim to be in community with, but they also have a lot of conservative views. Like, I'll give you an example. I talked about him a little bit earlier, but think about J.W. Lucas. He's a hip hop producer, and he's been in a lot of spaces where he's talked real greasy about our people. I mean, he had a bunch of shit to say about Breonna Taylor. And even when he was checked, I mean, he was saying shit to Tamika Mallory. You can say whatever you want about Tamika Mallory, whether you do or do not like her because of Black Lives Matter. But regardless, this is a white boy trying to check a black woman who is in some type of social justice space. Then he got pressed by Rizza Islam. He was weird and venomous with him. He got pressed by Tariq Nasheed, and he's been venomous with him so many damn times. Matter of fact, in the last interaction I think that they had, he said something about how he was going to beat his ass, and he was talking down to him and real condescending. That's what I'm saying. A lot of times these people, they like to actually be within that space only because they're trying to appropriate the culture, but they actually hate the people within that culture. That's why they'll, finger wag, talk down to them, talk crazy to them, talk about what they need to change. They'll speak greasy about like black people during their deaths at the hands of white supremacists. They won't sit there and say, I need to check my white brethren who decided that they were going to unjustly murder a black person just because they're black. They tried to justify the killing as if they were Charlie Kirk. So my point is that a lot of these yo-yo-yos are nothing more than a Charlie Kirk dressed up in a backwards hat, a chain, and a damn jersey from the fucking 90s. Some of you all are probably wondering, so, Cool Colas, when is it acceptable? The reality is cultural appropriation is never damn acceptable. But the only way to atone for doing something so racist and fucked up, because this is one of the most fucked up things you can do, because this is covert racism in practice. But the one thing that you could do to redeem yourself, if you are a yo-yo-yo, if you are a Vlad TV, if you are a J.W. Lucas, if you are any of the people who I discussed earlier, Eminem, whatever, you need to do things that put back on for those black people. How have you then taken the money that you appropriated, that you basically earned from your appropriation, and how have you invested that back into black people? Have you fought for reparations for black people, right? Have you ever tried to take your money, invest them into black artists having their own record labels and things like that? Have you ever tried to put a lot of black artists on so that they can go on and do their own thing? Or did you want to keep them underneath your label and then press out the lyrics that you wanted them to put out so that they portray negative images of black culture? Because that's what y'all do, Did you all ever try to, have them put out positive images so that they can later go on and do their own thing and then actually endorse them and then pour into them because they actually helped fund you? No, you don't do that shit, because that's the only way that this would even be redeemable. Not acceptable, but redeemable from a big racist fuck up from the beginning. The other point is, put down the butter biscuits, y'all. Stop inviting these people to the cookout. They do not care about you. They care about ripping from your culture and making a killing from it, then turning around and then acting like a white supremacist. That's literally all they are about. And they don't just exist in the hip hop culture. I'm going to be honest with you. We have white street prophets, as I talked about. They also are in a lot of these political spaces acting like social justice warriors, but then turning around and saying they're not even for reparations. So that tells you everything that you need to know. All right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to say about this topic. I will definitely have more to come, so make sure you stay tuned. In the meantime, I would love it if you like this video, subscribe, share it, and also hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Peace out, y'all.